Hey, this is MacHeads 101. My name is Jake, and as promised, in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you a relatively easy way to animate with some frames in Java. So I'm just going to show you these frames, and here's the frames. I imported them in the last tutorial. It's just 15 frames of this little creature eating a cheeseburger. And I did not make these frames, just to give credit where credit's due. They're made by a different member of MacHeads 101, and that's the guy who makes all our Flash tutorials. He made them for me. I told him I was going to be making a tutorial on animating in Java, and so I asked him for some frames, and he gave me some frames. So, yeah. So the first thing we're going to do here is make a timer, private timer, and I'll call it animator. And what a timer does is you give it a number and then an action listener. And the number is going to be how many milliseconds it's going to wait before it does the action listener again. Alright, so then we have private image icon. And we're actually going to have an array of them. So I'll call it image array. And this is going to have array is going to store all our frames. And then I'm going to make 3 ints here, private int delay, which is equals 50. So that's going to be how long before we switch frames for each frame. The delay, 50. Total frames equals 15 because we have 15 frames. And current frame and equals 0. And current frame is going to be actually changing based on what frame we're on. But right now we're going to set it to 0 because we want to start at the very first frame. So now we make the constructor public second. And in here, I'm going to do a few things. One, image array equals new image icon total frames. And basically total frames is equal to 15, so I could just put 15 in there, but then there would have been no point in making total frames. So basically this just means we created an array and it's going to be storing 15 image icons, which are going to be our 15 frames. So now is a really cool way to add all of them if you name them something very similar. I named all mine frame 0.png, frame 1.png, frame 2.png, and I did that for a very specific reason because I learned about a way that I can add all these elements with just 2 lines of code, and it's going to be a loop. For int I equals 0, I is less than image array dot length. And if this doesn't make all that much sense to you now, I promise it'll make sense by the end of the tutorial, because I'm probably going to go over everything too. So I plus plus. So basically, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do image array I equals. So we're actually going to be looping through this array and assigning it a value. Assigning each space in the array in value. And how we're going to do that is new image icon, and in here we normally give it a string, which is the name of our icon. So since I named them all something very similar, I can do frame plus I, because that's the only part in my name that actually changed, .png. So when I equals 0, 0 element is going to equal frame 0, because I can do this because I named them frame 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. And the only reason I made I what I change is because that's the only thing in my name that changes, and it's just an integer. So basically, if I had named them something completely different, I couldn't use this. I couldn't do this, but it saves you so much code, so that's why I named them all like that. So it's going to loop through this and assign it the value of one of the frames in that order. So now I'm just going to do animator equals new timer, and I'm going to give it takes 2 parameters, delay and this, and that's going to be this action listener. and then I just have to start it because it doesn't start by default. You can also stop it, and in the next tutorial we're actually going to be making 2 buttons to start and stop it, but that's getting a little ahead of myself. So now, outside this constructor, do public void paint component. And if you remember from the last tutorial, graphics G, that's what allowed us to draw our images to the window, and that's how we're going to be doing this. So public void paint component graphics G super.paint component G. Okay? So now, here's the cool part. Image array current image or current frame, actually I called it current frame, dot paint icon this, which is going to be this G, because we're going to be using G to paint it, and 0 0, which is just this x and y, the x and y coordinates of its top left corner. So right now current frame equals 0, so it's just going to print it's just going to do 0. So if I do current frame plus plus, each time this method gets called, current frame is going to increase by 1 more. And basically all the action listener is going to do is allow us to call this method again. So every 50 milliseconds it's going to call this method again. And when it calls the method again, current frame goes up 1, so it then draws the next frame. And we have to make an if statement to see if current frame is greater than or equal to image array.length, as in if it's reached the end of the animation, start it again at 0, so you can continue the animation. Otherwise, it would go once and then crash. So if current frame is greater than or equal to image array dot length current frame equals 0. I spelled current wrong. Okay, yeah. So essentially, if it's reached the end of the animation, restart it. That's what that means. Okay, and then now what we have to do is make it so we can call this method again. And we have to do that in the action listener because that's what's being called every 50 milliseconds. So public void action performed action events E, and I'm just going to do repaint. And all repaint means is clear all the graphics, clear all the images, and then call this method again. So what it does is it gives us a clean canvas and calls it again. So every 50 milliseconds, remove whatever image was there, and then it's going to increase current frame, so then it's going to do the next image. So essentially every 50 milliseconds, it's going to get rid of the old image and do the new one. And that's how animation works. And in here you can see I did all this stuff, f.add s, all that, and the size 500 by 400. I just did this all already because I knew there was going to be a lot of explaining to do, and I didn't want to go over how long YouTube permits it. So now we're going to run this and you'll see the animation. There we go. He is eating a cheeseburger, and it's wonderful. Alright, so thank you for watching Mac Has 101. Subscribe and goodbye.